So I'm going to speak to these first couple slides. This was something that I showed to the council at the beginning of this year that came out of the traffic study that we did, a town-wide traffic study. I want people to understand that when we looked at a year's worth of cell phone data, 36% of all cars during the week, morning, night, you name it, 1 in 3 cars that you look at when you're out on the street has nothing to do with Morristown. They didn't come from here, and they're not going here. They're just passing through. So that's not going to change, and that's a drumbeat of daily life, living in a town that's the hole in the donut, and the downtown for the region, and kind of caught between the highway and a lot of suburbs. And so the other trips, 30% of our trips coming into town, either people that are going back home or coming to work, and 28 are people going to work or leaving after work. And then 7% are sort of intra-town. That's like maybe me. So these are the existing conditions. Is this? So Matt, do you want to walk us through a little bit of this existing condition?
Sure, absolutely. Again, thank you everyone for letting me speak here. In front of you right here is some drone video we took during the morning rush hour. This will be a subsequent video in the evening rush hour, but this is what you see in a typical day at this intersection. Again, morning you have a little bit less traffic going on. Generally you get through this signal on one light, but you kind of see, especially what you just saw right now, you saw a huge surge of cars reach this intersection, hit a red light before they make it to the green. You really don't have great coordination amongst all these closely spaced signals in this corridor. This is the evening peak hour, and you'll kind of see this build up over time starting now. You're starting to see what was shown in the previous slide, which is those huge delays coming down from Spring Street and then also going up towards Speedwell. What you have in this case is a time period where it takes 2, 3, even 4 cycles to get through the light, especially coming down Spring. Because of the way that traffic signal is designed, you have very little green time. About 20 to 30% of the green time at that light at Spring and Morris is given to Spring. So you're kind of choking that approach, which again, as Phil mentioned, that's a large amount of traffic coming from Headquarters Plaza through that way coming down. But again, you see as it's getting a little closer to dusk here, those headlights and rear tail lights on this stretch of roadway, and you really start seeing the backups on the roadway. Generally 5:40, 6 o'clock. At this time period, it tended to die down a little bit on Spring going towards Morris, but again, you still saw some traffic going up towards Speedwell. Again, generally, as Phil mentioned, you have about 25,000 vehicles per day traveling through this intersection here. Although Y intersections really create a great sense of place in terms of providing a nice visual endpoint, they're not great for traffic, and Morristown knows that pretty well. Between the intersection of Spring and Morris here, you have Sussex and Speedwell, Spring and Speedwell, all these kind of Y intersections that really don't operate great because you have basically competing major roadways all kind of filtering together into a pinch point. So when we got this project, one of the first things that we saw and the developer saw was that we have a problem here. We have no shot at putting anything on the site unless we figure out how we can fix this problem that exists today unrelated to this development. Most of the time when we have a client that says, okay, we want you to do a traffic study, the first thing we do is look at what type of signal modifications you could do. This is usually the simplest, the cheapest, doesn't require any right-of-way. How can we just fix that light that's out there? Can we add a little green time? Can we use some new technology? What can we do to make the infrastructure out there work? And we looked at the analysis, and there's really no more juice in that orange to squeeze. There's really not a whole lot more you could do in this intersection based on the volumes you have. Again, every developer prefers just this little technology change and move on. It really wasn't the option here. Second option we looked at was restricting turning movements. You have a problem intersection, you want to, left turns are a problem, have them go another direction. As you saw in the previous video, there's no other place to put this traffic. They're going to be stuck in another traffic jam someplace else. There's really not many other alternative means. In fact, all those other alternative routes, people who know the area would take anyway. If someone can take Pine or another roadway to avoid this area, they're doing it anyway. There's really no point to restrict turning movements. Third one is roadway widening. Typically, I would say the 1970s, 60s, the old urban design type of model or suburban design model was let's just widen the roadway. just knock down whatever's in its way, make this road wider. If you have 3 lanes, let's make it 4. You have 4 lanes, let's make it 5. Just add capacity. As traffic engineering has developed, one, we learned that really just increases additional demand. It's called induced demand. When you start increasing capacity, more traffic will find itself to that roadway, and just you'll end up with the same delays. Secondly, it's really insensitive to other means of transportation other than the car. The reason why you have some of these, I'd say, poorly designed urban highways is because they widen out these roadways and really put the pedestrians or bicyclists last. So you have really long crossing distances. You have roadways that are really high speeds and not meant for downtown walkability, walkable developments. So again, while there is an opportunity to widen here, you're really going to see a hampering from a pedestrian standpoint, which I think is counter to what Morristown is going for. In addition, with the widening, you're really still not getting, and we've done the analysis, you're not getting some of the benefits that we saw with the roundabout, which we'll speak to later, is you're really just stacking the cars in an additional lane. So instead of a queue being, let's say, 400 feet of approach, maybe you're making it 200, but those cars still need to get to the next light or onto the next roadway. You're really not fixing and creating a, I would say, a cohesive fix to the whole area. The last one we looked at was the roundabout. Now the roundabout, from a typical developer standpoint, is not people's preferred mechanism because it typically, in most cases, is ruled out because of right-of-way or ruled out because of cost. They take up more land and they're much more expensive to build, in the order of 4 to 5 times more than just running a simple traffic light at an intersection. So when we were looking at this opportunity, and I know that your mobility study, having read that and having spoken to some people within Morristown, that the roundabout, even in the mobility study, was considered, but because of the cost and because of the right-of-way, really couldn't be considered as a viable solution for Morristown to proceed with, because that right-of-way is not there. As you saw from the slide Phil mentioned earlier, there is a significant amount of right-of-way on private property being used for commercial purposes right now that would need to be utilized in order to create a roundabout. So we ended up proceeding with the roundabout design. Now, you'll see later on some of the simulations, some of the performance, but when people first think of roundabouts, a lot of people think of the typical New Jersey traffic circle. There is a difference between them. The traffic circles you see down the shore, or the old Ledgewood Circle that you would have saw in Morris County, those are created at much higher speeds, much higher volume. Again, highway level traffic, highway level performance, and not roundabouts, which are designed for traffic calming measures in more of a downtown area. So what we looked at in terms of the roundabout is not just traffic performance, but also how they operate in terms of safety. Now there's a number of studies, and they're shown here. The federal government has put together studies. The Insurance Institute of Highway Safety has put together studies. And you see a complete reduction in terms of accidents that create injuries, about 72 to 80% reduction in accidents that are major accidents or injury accidents because of the traffic calming effects of the roundabout. And again, I'll go through the positives of the roundabout just in terms of traffic flow, but from a safety standpoint, you see a reduction in traffic. But one of the most interesting ones was the Journal of Safety Research had a study that showed that the amount of accidents actually decreased over time, and they found that it was about 8.8% over time with these multi-lane roundabouts. And again, I think some of that is in terms of driver learned behavior. As people become more aware of them, the signage, people recognize the signage, they work through the design of the roundabout. You actually see a year-over-year reduction in multi-lane roundabout accidents. And then the last thing was the Transportation Research Record and Board, which is a federal publication, found that there were significant declines in delays, queue lengths, fuel consumptions, and vehicle emissions. So again, a balance of driver performance as well as environmental performance with these roundabouts. But again, I think that the key piece coming out of here is that you do see a reduction in accidents, you see a reduction in severity of accidents. There's been a number of studies that show in terms of pedestrian accidents, a reduction in terms of the number of accidents that are dealt with at pedestrians versus standard intersections. So we do see a safer roadway design with roundabouts, and this roundabout design is being pushed by the Department of Transportation in New Jersey. Burlington County loves roundabouts wherever they can. They're proposing roundabouts. This is a measure that people are advancing. So again, roundabout safety features. What can we add to this roundabout to make it even more safe? And what we've shown here is a number of different features. Bill, I don't know how to work this thing. There. Okay. So I'll go around this roundabout. in terms of the safety features that we can add. First is the rectangular flashing beacons. These are the lights that when you press the little push button on the side of the road, you get these high-intensity flashes that allows people to see that there is someone crossing the street. This has been recently adopted by the MUTCD, which is the federal guidelines for traffic control devices, and the research has shown that there is an increased driver cooperation or driver allowance for pedestrians to cross the street when utilizing these flashing beacons. Next option we could do is bike ramps. Essentially, this allows for vehicles that, bicyclists that travel in a shower or shared lane to actually enter the sidewalk or shared use path. As Phil showed on those previous slides, we are providing generously wide sidewalks. This allows for a bicyclist who does not feel comfortable going around the roundabout to enter safely onto the sidewalk in that location. They're actually angled in the direction of the bicycle travel path, so that they are, as you can see, it's more of an angled ramp as opposed to a typical ADA crosswalk, which is more perpendicular to the roadway. That is something that can be added. Next up is raised lane dividers. So what is interesting is that as research has been done on these multi-lane roundabouts, one of the biggest issues with the Jersey Circle and some other multi-lane roundabouts is the issue you have in terms of how do you handle the center of the roundabout? How do you handle the weave condition when you're going from the inside lane to the outside lane? The way that we've designed this roundabout is that there is no need for any vehicle to ever weave within the roundabout itself. You establish the lane when you're approaching the roundabout, and you basically travel within the roundabout. We have a couple animations showing how you get to the various different approaches and destinations without ever having to change lanes within the roundabout. And those raised lane dividers help enforce that lack of weaving. There's also the opportunity for raised crosswalks and in-road warning lights. So basically another enhancement to the pedestrian feel, where you could have the pedestrian basically be at a consistent elevation through the roundabout, and vehicles basically have to go over what is similar to a speed table in the pedestrian realm. And also in-road warning lights, that's basically similar to the flashing beacons you would have on the signs. You could also embed them into the pavement, so when someone's walking across the street, there is actually lights within the crosswalk allowing people to have better visibility of pedestrians. Again, most of these features are things that are not, you can't install in a typical traffic signal, that can be used in a roundabout. In the center is a elevated landscape island. Again, this is a safety feature, but I think also an aesthetic feature. Allows you to, there's a number of plantings you could do, art, any type of streetscape can be done within the roundabout. Again, we typically do not want it to be a destination for people. We prefer to keep the pedestrians out of the center of the roundabout, but it can be a nice visual and artistic piece within the center of this project. And lastly is the raised splitter island. So as you're a pedestrian crossing the street, you have a much shorter crossing distance when you're within the roadway itself. Right now, when you're trying to cross this intersection, whether it's on Spring or Morris in the current condition, you're talking about you're within the roadway for anywhere between 50 and 60 feet. With these raised splitter islands, you're in the roadway for 25 feet or less when you're crossing this intersection. So in terms of the area where you're within the vehicular realm, there is much less crossing distance with this roundabout than a typical intersection. How does it work? Phil, I don't know if you need to press something here. I'm trying to. Okay, so this is just a simulation not showing the amount of traffic that is going through the roundabout, but I'll walk you through how vehicles basically go through the roundabout itself from different approaches. This will loop through a couple times here, so I'll catch you next time coming through. So you have these yellow cars coming along Morris. They could approach in 2 lanes, and in this case, both continue onto Spring without having to recirculate the roundabout. This is most similar to the Morris to Spring Street that you have today. We kind of have that slip ramp along the side. Now we have some green cars coming down from Spring. Again, you could line them up side by side and have them exit along Morris. Next one we're going to catch is the orange when it comes back around. So I think you need to reset this slide. Backwards.
Can we ask questions?
Sure.
So on the left, the cars all stopped.
Yeah, so when
This
you're,
orange car stopped.
Right.
Is there a stop sign there? or something?
there's a yield, so basically you yield to the vehicles that are within the center of the roundabout.
Okay.
So we'll catch it the next time they come through, and I have another simulation with different arrangement of cars as they're approaching lanes.
What if the car on the right wants to go left?
Yeah, so, and I have that option as well. So the orange car, again, yields to the vehicles within the center and then circulates around. So that orange car, I think, is an interesting car to show because what it allows for is similar to what I said where there's no weaving within the circle. If you're coming along Morris and you want to go to Spring, you're on the inside lane as you're going around the roundabout, and then you have the ability to exit on Spring. So you basically did not have to weave, you didn't have to change lanes, and you become the exiting car on the next approach. I'm going to show the next one, and we'll walk this one through a little bit slower. It's just a different arrangement of cars. So again, you have two yellow cars approaching. This one is yielding to the orange car, stacked up side by side. They're coming around the roundabout. One decides to exit on the Morris. The other one is actually circulating all the way around and making the U-turn movement. The reason why this movement is important is because one of the benefits of this roundabout for this type of development is the fact that, and you'll see in a later slide, the majority of traffic leaving the site is actually going back to 287. As office destination, a lot of people are going back to the highway. What this roundabout allows is for that U-turn movement to occur where someone can exit the driveway that would be on Morris, go around the roundabout, and go to 287. In addition, we will have the relocated Spring Place, which, I don't know where my pointer went, relocated Spring Place, which is just off the screen here, where vehicles can make the left turn at a traffic signal and come down this approach as well. So being able to make a U-turn movement at this roundabout, in addition to having the new signal at Spring Place, is a benefit in terms of being able to accommodate the type of users that we utilize in this building in terms of the vehicular traffic destination. And again, I'll start this slide over again so we can look at the other approaches. Again, car coming down Spring and Green, circulating, again, does not change lanes and has the ability to get out on Mars. We'll catch the orange one when he comes back around, but again, you have the two yellow ones coming around. One exits on Mars, one exits on back doing the U-turn, going all the way around to Mars, heading east. Again, never changing a lane within the roundabout itself. So there's no need to ever make that weaving movement. That is, I would say, detrimental to most traffic circles or Jersey traffic circles. So again, orange car coming around has the right of way, and he circulates to Spring. Basically, any movement at this roundabout can be made without changing lanes within the center of the roundabout, which is the key. That is what allows for this type of designed roundabout to be much, much safer than what you may envision of the 1950s, 40s traffic circles. There's no changing lanes inside of that. How do you get the people on the correct lanes? I think some of that is on later slides, but basically it's through signage, it's through striping. You may have overhead signs if you find that there's a need to put a sign out there, but the benefit is that you have multiple options from different lanes. So if you're on this inside lane, on Mars, there'll be signed you have to continue on to Spring. If you're on the outside lane, you have the option. You go to Spring, you go to Mars, or you come all the way around and make that U-turn movement again without changing a lane. And we can do that from all approaches. Just some other design features here. Wilmot is going to be one way, basically into the parking area. That was within your mobility study. It actually recommended to make that a one-way street, even with a traffic signal operation there. We believe that works best with this roundabout, and I do know that in terms of the parking garage project, which we'll talk about later, also it contemplated potentially making that a one-way into the parking area, not into the circle itself. Functionality within the network. So we had performed a number of counts, and we also utilized Morristown's traffic simulation that they had helped prepare, helped create, which includes the traffic volumes that were collected by the Morristown's consultant, in addition to putting in a number of intersection existing conditions. So basically what we had utilized was a model that includes all the way up Speedwell, actually all the way to Early, and all the way to basically 287 where you get up to 287 to the east up here. We basically utilized that section of the model to see how this would operate within the overall roadway network. We utilized the traffic signal timings that are out there today. We also looked at what recommendations along our frontage were included within the Morristown mobility study. That included eliminating some on-street parking along Morris Street in certain areas. Again, this was included within the mobility study, and we think that this project can be the catalyst to make some of those improvements along this entire corridor. It may be a little difficult to see at this type of, Phil, is there a way you could zoom on there? If you could see a little bit closer, there is you'll see what we typically would expect is with this roundabout, you still have the queuing that exists going up towards Speedwell. Again, I think Phil had mentioned that there is some grant money and some additional improvements that are looking to be made at that Speedwell intersection. Nope. All right, well, I'll explain what is going on here. But what you do see is, if you look closely, a very limited amount of queue going down towards the roundabout. You're looking at a queue as opposed to what you saw in the video earlier, where the queue from Spring is basically backed up to the water, if not further. You're basically looking at a queue of 2 to 3 cars, and they're consistently moving. What you don't have is what you have at the traffic signal today, where you'll wait, the lights will turn red, you'll wait 60 seconds, and then you'll finally get a chance to speed your way to the intersection if you're lucky enough. And then you're going to wait another 60 to 70 seconds for the light to turn green again. The way this roundabout works, you're basically at a constant motion. You're moving about every 7 to 10 seconds as there's a gap within the roundabout. So what we've done is we've effectively eliminated the queuing southbound on Spring. We've alleviated some of the congestion that also occurs on Morris. If you look back at the drone video that we previously prepared, there was a time period where the green light released from this intersection, and the cars got to the Morris and Spring intersection, just stopped. So you got all these cars speed up at one intersection, stop at the next. They're not coordinated. The way the roundabout works will allow for that traffic to be continually fed to the roundabout. But the key here is a decrease in delay, decrease in queuing along Spring heading towards Morris. This is a map of where the traffic is going based on the development of this site. The traffic that is being generated by the site primarily going to 287. We're looking at about 70% of the traffic is destined for 287. In terms of the other streets in the neighborhood, you have about 12% heading up Spring Street, heading towards Speedwell, about 3% that would be using Martin Luther King. Park, I think you're looking at 8%, and Lafayette and Morris basically heading eastbound but not getting on 287, about 4%.
So you're saying trip distribution, you're talking about the trip distribution associated with the proposed development, the additional cars?
Correct. Okay. This is with the proposed development, the additional cars, all the traffic to be generated by the site. Where are they coming from? Where are they going to? So again, being located right near 287, and that being where the majority of the people would like to go, 70% of them, we want to make sure this site is designed to get people back to 287 as soon as possible without having to go through any more of the Morristown roadway network. What we put at the top is the difference in trips being generated by the site today versus the proposed development. It's important to remember that this is a site that we're redeveloping that is very busy. When you're out there, especially lunchtime, sometimes during evening rush hour, tough to find a parking spot in that lot. It generates a lot of traffic today. You're talking about a site that generates about 275 trips in the morning peak hour today, and in the evening about 434 trips. But this site will increase the amount of trips. It's about 184 in an hour in the morning and 163 in the evening in an hour. Again, so although there was a lot of talk previously about you're creating this site, all these employees, it's really somewhat taking away the traffic that's currently being generated on the site. So the net difference, there's a reduction in terms of the net difference between existing and proposed. The other thing that I mentioned is that the design that we're providing in terms of this roundabout accounts for all the increased traffic that we are generating, all the increased traffic associated with the parking garage project, and additional growth within the roadway network throughout Morristown. We're looking at a 1% growth, looking out even 7 years post the build condition of this site, and still high capacity within the roundabout. So this development, although we're adding traffic, we're taking care of our traffic, we're taking care of the garage's traffic, we're taking care of Morristown's existing traffic, all as part of this roundabout project. One of the key features...
You're going to show later on how you exit that site?
Yes, I can.
Where the traffic's
going?
Sure. That's part of your presentation.
I think we have slides, and if not, I'll go backwards and find slides to help. One of the key features in terms of how people measure traffic is by travel time. Basically, how long does it take you to get from point A to B in current condition, how long is it going to take you with this roundabout and the development. Again, all our build analysis includes this proposed development, the parking garage, and general background growth within Morristown. So this is the travel time in the evening from Ridgedale all the way up to Speedwell. And again, this model that we utilized calculated that it takes around 12 minutes to get from Ridgedale to through the intersection at Speedwell at evening rush hour in the existing condition. With this development, with the roundabout, with all the traffic associated with the nearby developments, that's reduced to 9 minutes and 45 seconds, so a reduction of 22% with the development of this roundabout. So again, even with the traffic that this site is generating, you're talking about reducing your travel time 22% if that's your route. We also look the opposite direction. What would it do if you're coming from Speedwell and Spring intersection to Ridgedale? And this is where we see the biggest benefits, because this is where that roundabout really proves its worth, because it allows for that southbound Spring Street approach to function so much better. You do not have that queuing that you saw in that drone video. It reduces this travel pattern from 10 minutes and 44 seconds to 3 minutes and 27 seconds, about 2/3 reduction in travel time. Next one we looked at is basically coming from the green, basically from the Dumont-Morris intersection, Park Place intersection to Ridgedale, coming from the green. You're seeing a reduction of about 42% from about 5 minutes to 3 minutes in the evening rush hour. And then basically the reverse in the evening, you're talking about 44% reduction in travel time. 7.5 minutes, 7.75 minutes, about 4 minutes and 20 seconds heading towards the green. So again, all of those major approaches, you're seeing an improvement. The one that I think you see the most improvement is that Spring Street towards Morris approach, again, that we highlighted within the drone video. And again, I think you would see even greater benefits to this one here as part of any future improvements that that Morristown is making to the Speedwell Spring approach. I think you would see a release of some of that queue that is upstream of here, but you do get benefits, again, about 22% improvement in terms of your travel time. And again, I just want to emphasize, this includes our development, includes the parking garage, includes general background growth within Morristown, and the roundabout as part of this study. This slide, again, is just highlighting the difference in queuing that we have within our model in terms of the existing condition at this intersection and the proposed condition with the roundabout. You have basically a continually moving queue as part of this development. Just to highlight on this slide in terms of how where the site's driveways would be, there would be one driveway up in relocated Spring Place. This is Spring Place today. Again, Phil mentioned how difficult it is when you're coming out of either behind the 7-Eleven or behind the Burger King and trying to basically go back to Morris, go back to 287 today. It's because it's really closely spaced to the intersection, and the angle is very difficult. It's tough to see out when you're trying to look right to make the left-hand turn out at Spring Place. We are moving it up to the top left corner of this page and putting a traffic signal in there. The other driveway would basically be located just at the edge of this screen, or it'd be right in, right out only driveway, so you can make the right turn out and come around the roundabout and head back towards 287 if that is your ultimate destination. That's where the second driveway would be. And that's right in, right out only. Phil, I don't know if you want to mention other improvements or design plans.
Yeah, there are some of the things that we were asked about and heard about over time was, can we do more for bicycles? Can we do more for pedestrians? That somebody said, this is Jersey, there is no courtesy here. That we don't yield here. And there are pedestrians maybe. So we did have identified other things that could get modeled. But before we go and started on all these different permutations of the roundabout, the engineers and Matt can speak to this, determined this is where you would start. This is the optimized kind of solution that balances congestion, vehicular congestion, balances cycles, balances mobility, pedestrian mobility. But one of the things we're about to launch is a pedestrian hybrid beacon up on Flagler Street and Speedwell Avenue. That will be turned on the end of this month, beginning of next month. And you'll see that it's going to create a red flashing to let pedestrians pass, create a walk, do not walk, head-to-head pedestrian signal. That can also be incorporated into these. It will reduce some of those benefits that Matt spoke about. And we can go and model and speak to that, but we didn't want to provide and kind of confuse this issue by providing all these different options and different permutations. We mostly want to hear, I think, at ultimately the end of this, kind of where the council sits, where the public sits on priorities, now, or implement them as part of this design, or say, let's get it up and running. We could always add it later if pedestrians feel like they're not getting a good break in the traffic. Other things could include taking some of the width of that pedestrian promenade, that 50 or whatever feet, and maybe repurposing some of it as a two-way bike lane. But part of that is we have to take a broader look at Morristown's bicycle network. I think Councilman Armington is on the phone right now. He could speak. He and I wrote together the bicycle plan for this town, and we have a lot of bike lanes to nowhere that could be planned. And I don't want that to be part of this project. If we would need to take a step back, take a much broader look at the approaches, on upstream and downstream, essentially, of this site to determine, is it the right thing to do right now to incorporate a dedicated bike path, off-road bike path, or do we start with the sharrows and find a way to design the sidewalks in a way that can be adapted for bicycle use into the future. And again, many of the solutions that Mr. Seckler provided are optimized solutions, are the balanced solutions that, because time is precious in a traffic signal. You have a 60-second, that's the one thing you can't add, is time to his traffic cycle. And if you give a little bit to pedestrians, a little bit to bicycles, a little bit to cars, you kind of end up where we are now, where nobody's happy. So this is an optimized solution from an engineering perspective. But I think the point is that I'm saying here is that it can be changed, and there are things that we can add over and above the features if you and the public directed us to take a look at those things. Another big component of this was the retailers, and sort of what will happen to the retailers, and have they been consulted, and where does this stand? Again, there's about 11, 12 retailers here. We focused on and asked the developer and landlord to focus on the mom and pop retailers, independently owned retailers. And they've spoken at this point to all of them. And what we talked about, or what they talked about, we were not part of these discussions. So we're getting the second hand. We can ask the attorney to come up if you want to answer any questions, but I'm here to relay that there was a discussion about the logistics of relocating within the project, within that 27,000 square feet of retail, or talking about a number of potential alternative sites in and around this area that we identified in partnership with the partnership, sat down with Jen Waring of the partnership and talked about other potential storefronts where some of these retailers can go. What we heard back was nobody was surprised. Nobody was taken by surprise with this. That this project almost got off the ground once before, that developers had come to them once before with the same similar conversation about relocation and about their leases, that the landlord has kept them up to date. The landlord did not go and renew leases. They negotiated leases with an end term with this in mind. So people, from what I've heard, have said, look, is it happening or isn't it happening? Because this uncertainty is as big of a problem for us as anything else will be. And we will make plans. We are a business. We will roll with the punches. But we just need clear direction. And really at this point, the developers come to us and said the same thing, that we will work with these people. We'll find out how much money they need to move. We'll find their different locations. But nobody can go and start executing leases in alternative locations, and people can't figure out what their fit-out costs will be and whatever moving expenses they have, and kind of quantifying that stuff until we understand what we want as a community. But these things, people, again, I think the big points here, people were not taken by surprise. People are prepared to sort of work with the landlord and work with the developer to do these things. One of the things that was out there about relocating back into this project, a lot of, and I didn't really think about this, but the business owners, they don't want to move twice. to move out of here into another alternative location and then come back after 2 years or whatever when this is done. So a lot of them would prefer, they all love Morristown, they all want to be in this town. They would like to find an alternative location, but this idea is they'd like to just sort of move on, move out, find footing in another location, and thrive and make their long-term plans where they are. But right now they can't make long-term plans. They can't invest in their stores. They can't invest in the storefronts and in any sort of large projects internally in their spaces because they're not sure what's going to happen. So I think in some respects the actions of this council will provide clarity and will allow this to kind of unfold with some direction from the town. And that we will continue obviously to monitor and make sure that the developer and landlord are doing right by our business owners. One additional point that I did not mention, some people may have said that an 8-story building was too much, too tall. We have worked, and really the developers, the ones who did all the work with their architects, they've agreed to bring it down, the taller of the 2 buildings down to, I don't even know where this thing is. That building will now be 7 stories. The building kind of gets flattened and pushed out a little bit toward the back. All the renderings you've seen here have been at 7 stories. And all the kind of simulations from Colin Center and things like that were the 7-story model. So we are now down to 6 and 7 stories. The right-hand side building is 6 stories, the left-hand side building is 7 stories. So they've taken I think a good faith step to work, to hear the community's concerns, to hear your concerns as a council elected officials, to bring it down to a lower scale, while still maintaining probably the minimum commercially reasonable kind of floor plate to get the kind of tenants that will provide the benefits really.
Morristown.